Hello everyone, welcome to your favorite topic, Russian oil refineries. This is the Russian oil refinery bingo campaign that the Ukrainians are executing right now. And this is a special Christmas operation edition. The last time I spoke on this topic was back in mid-October, and I figured since you guys love that topic so much, I would re-explore that since in 2 months quite a lot has changed, quite a lot has happened, and let's take a look back at that Ukrainian campaign and how it performed. So here we're taking a look again as a quick recap why this is important and where are the Russian oil refineries. So there's 45 oil refineries which I've mapped out here on the map. Whenever you see those blocks with the red boxes around them, you can assume that those are oil refinery clusters which are clustered on top of each other and built up nearby. And that's why I set them up in a diagonal. But there's 45 oil refineries. And why is it important, this Russian oil refinery bombing campaign? Because 64% of Russian exports were oil and gas prior to the war. And why is that important? Because the Russian state is essentially using these revenues in order to reinvest and keep its war machine running. And by cutting off those revenues, that is a very efficient way at slashing the Russian government expenditures towards military aims, because that's its major income stream. So based on the analysis, we see that there are 6 mega oil refineries which account on their own for 34% of total production. This is based on if they're larger than 15 million tons per annum of oil refining capacity. And so those are marked in red across the map. Then we have 21 mid-sized oil refineries. It's my own definition, the mids, megas, and smalls. And mids account for 51% of oil refining capacity and are 5 to 15 million tons per annum of oil refining capacity. And then finally, we have the yellow ones spread across the map. And those small ones there's 18 of them. They account for 15% and are 0 to 5 million tons of oil refining capacity. There's some other ones, smaller ones, which I didn't take into account. But in general, this should account for 99% of total Russian oil refining capacity. And if we look here, you see I pasted a graph here on the right, and that's just to illustrate, if you can't see it visually on the map, well, in terms of numbers, 77% of oil refining capacity is in the west of Russia. So west of the Urals is my definition. Everything west of the Urals is considered Western Russia. Then we have 20% in central Russia, of which a third is that one mega oil refining plant in Omsk, which is the number one down there. And it's actually the largest oil refining factory in Russia, or the oil refinery in Russia. And then finally, we have a tiny amount in the Far East, just 2 oil refineries, both mid-sized and accounting for 3% of total oil refining capacity. So let's take a look at what effect the Ukrainian bombing campaign had on these oil refineries. So first of all, in this slide, what I did last time was I did a first mapping on a time horizon, how these bombing campaigns were taking place, how many bombs occurred in each month of 2024 and 2025. And there was a clear pattern there that I identified, which seems to have been correct. Because if we look now at the updated version, we can see a confirmation of the pattern that I expected back then. So what was that? Well, we saw that in 2024, in March 2024, there was a semi-large bombing campaign of 10 bombings in March, and that was the first test, or the first idea, as I named it here, of the potential ability of Ukraine to bomb those oil refineries. However, Ukraine was held back here by the Biden administration, which had an upcoming election, and they did not want any fluctuations in oil prices to negatively affect Biden. So Ukraine was held back somewhat there. And so we essentially see either a stockpiling over 9 months from that first bombing campaign, or simply the American administration, which was at the time supporting Ukraine heavily, had simply told Ukraine do not bomb Russian oil refineries anymore. But what we see as of 2025 is the second bombing campaign. And this is what I call the test and the first real bombing campaign, because we see instead of 1 month, it was a 3-month bombing campaign. We had 1 month, so in January, 7 bombings, in February, 11 bombings, and in March, 10 bombings. So almost a tripling in size of campaign in comparison with the first bombing campaign. So 180% increase from 10 bombings all the way to 28 bombings. So yeah, almost a tripling in size. And then we see again a 4-month period of stockpiling, or perhaps Ukraine was simply targeting other things because Russia had increased its air defenses on refineries and decreased the air defenses in other areas, or perhaps other reasons that I don't know. Write your comments below if you have better ideas on why Ukraine did not bomb between April and July 2025. But then we come to the third bombing campaign, and now we have a far fuller picture with this updated video on that bombing campaign, because back then I did it mid-October, so there was really not that much data on October, nor November, nor December yet. But we see that that campaign expanded by 1 month, so it went from 3 months to 4 months, and we see that the bombings in each month increased by approximately 50%, right? So where it used to be on average 10 bombings per month, we're now on average 15 or higher bombings per month, and 1 month extra. So a much larger bombing campaign of 64 bombings from August all the way into November of this year. And that brings it right to 132% more bombings than the second bombing campaign, which occurred at the beginning of this year. And now we are mid-December, and I only identified 1 bombing in December. So I would say that is sort of a sign that we are entering a new stockpiling phase of the refinery bombing campaign. Or, as said previously, Ukraine may have decided to start targeting other areas, or Ukraine has found out, hey, this bombing campaign has worked so well, there's no need to bomb it again, because those refineries are simply not functioning properly anymore, and Russia has been unable to repair them. So again, write your comments below if there may be other reasons that I'm missing. But so overall, what we can say from those 3 main bombing campaigns which have occurred so far, they have become longer. So they've gone from 1 month back in 2024 all the way to 4 months in 2025. That's 4 times longer. They have become faster after one another. Whereas between the 2024 and the first 2025 bombing campaign, there were 9 months. Well, now the stockpiling period, or the pause period, went from 9 months down to 4 months between the second and the third bombing campaign. And so this gives me the expectation that if we have indeed come into a new stockpiling phase in December, perhaps that stockpiling phase will again be slashed by half. So instead of again waiting 4 months or again 9 months, we'll be waiting 2 months for the next bombing campaign. And then finally, the bombing campaigns have become more intense. So not only are they longer, but they're more intense because in each respective month, there are far more bombings. As we saw between the second bombing campaign to the third bombing campaign, there's an increase per month of 50%. Imagine if that trend continues over into the fourth bombing campaign, which, assuming there's a stockpiling phase of 2 months, will start in February next year. And assuming an increase of, again, 50% per month, should hit almost about 20 bombings or 22 bombings per month. So 22 bombings per month as of February, and instead of 4 months, it may become 5 months campaign. So 5 months with 20 bombings per month, right? We're already talking about serious numbers of bombings here per month. Hi everyone, if you're enjoying this YouTube video, please don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. It's free for you, but it's a huge token of appreciation for me. And if you do really want to support the channel even more, I've written some books. You can find them on Amazon. The links are in the description below. and you can buy them as physical and Kindle copies if you do want to do that. And thank you so much. Back to the video. But let's take a look at the map, since I know you guys love these maps so much. Which oil refineries have been hit in 2025? Well, here's an update. And most of the new bombings since my last videos have occurred on oil refineries which have already been bombed in 2025. However, we have a brand new entry in the list which has been bombed for the first time, and that's the oil refinery of Mariel. And I've marked it there on the map with a first hit sign in red. But let's look at the data. Well, there's only 5 oil refineries in the west which have not yet been hit. And I'm looking here at my data sheet. We have in the northwest number 39. That's the Nevsky Mazut oil refinery in St. Petersburg. It has not been hit in 2025. However, it was hit in January 31st of 2024. So it has been hit at least once. The next, the remaining oil refineries have never been hit, and those are number 43, which is the first Kaluga Neft product oil refinery in Kaluga. It's a very, very small one. We have the number 36, which is the Astrakhan oil refinery, which is also a small at 3.3 million barrels per annum. And then we actually have a serious one, which is number 7, and it's the only mid-sized oil refinery in the west which has not been hit yet, and that's the Perm oil refinery, and it's actually quite large. It's the 7th largest oil refinery in Russia at 13 million barrels per oil. So that one easily outsizes all of the other remaining Western oil refineries, even if they're all summed together. So that number 7 is a serious target which should be taken into consideration. So in total, in 2025, there have been 94 bombings of oil refineries. 28 out of 45 oil refineries have been hit so far in 2025. These represent currently 80% of oil refining capacity for Russia. As we know, the vast majority of oil refining capacity is in Western Russia, and pretty much all of Western oil refineries have been hit at least once. And 27 of the 32 Western refineries have been hit in 2025, and 1 of the Central oil refineries, which is the Tyumen oil refinery, has been hit, and 0 of the 2 Far Eastern oil refineries have been hit. What has changed since last time? Well, there's been 20 new bombings since the last video. So bearing in mind the last video was 2 months ago, that means that there have been 20 bombings in 60 days. So 1 bombing every 3 days. And then, as I said, that Mariel oil refinery is a brand new oil refinery on the list. And to give you a perspective on how many times each oil refinery has been hit in 2025, and here I'm only looking at the oil refineries that have been hit at least 1 time, so I'm not including the ones that have been hit 0 times. We see that there's, as I said, 20 new bombings. We see that there have been some oil refineries which are getting a lot more love than the others. For example, we have the Saratov refinery, which has been hit 4 times since the last video, giving it a total of 11 hits this year. That one's been getting a lot of love. We have the Novokuybishevsk oil refinery, which has gotten 3 new hits since the last video, and the Ryazan Lukoil oil refinery, which has also gotten 3 new hits at a total of 9 hits this year. The number 3rd place of most hits this year is the Lukoil Nizhnevolsky oil refinery at 8 hits. And then the Syzran and the Novokuybishevsk, which I've also already mentioned, Syzran and Novokuybishevsk are tied at 7 hits this year at 4th and 4th place. And then finally, we have the Slavyansk oil refinery, which has also been hit once since my last video, bringing it to a total of 5. And then we have quite a few which have been hit 4 times, one of which has doubled since the last video, which is the Kstovo refinery, which has gotten 2 new hits, so from 2 to 4 hits now. The Bashneft Ufanevketim has been hit 4 times, and the Tuapse has been hit 4 times, but no new hits on those 2, and neither does the Bashneft UNPZ, also staying constant at 4 hits. And then we have at least 1 new hit on the Yaroslavl oil refinery, which is near to Moscow. We have 1 new hit on the Taif NK oil refinery, one new hit on the Orsk oil refinery, and then that one new hit on the Mari refinery, NPZ, all the way at the bottom there, which is the first time that that oil refinery has ever been hit in this war. So in this next slide, we see a very dumb exercise of what if you've been hit and then your production capacity is 100% down. I did that in the last video under the assumption that any oil refinery hit in October is 100% down. And back then, as you see on the left side here on the October 15th version, we had 29% of refining capacity being theoretically down under the assumption that it would be 100% down, which is an incorrect assumption, but it's just an exercise here. And if we would look in the December 15th version and we would say, okay, anyone that's been hit in October and November, and there's only been one hit in December, but basically October and November is 100% down, and you're still going to be 100% down. We see that quite a few oil refineries have been added since then, marked in orange here for the December 15th version, and that would bring it up from 29% all the way to 46% of oil refining capacity being down across Russia, simply since beginning of October. So since October and November, and we saw that in December, the campaign actually pretty much, you could say, stopped in its intensity with just one hit. Well, we have a 46% capacity down across the entirety of Russia. And that's a huge number and really impressive, to be honest. And this is only the third oil refinery bombing campaign, which we've seen and likely will be seeing more coming up into 2026. And since methodology is quite important, this is actually the third oil refinery video that I'm making as an update. And I've also done one video on oil export terminal bombings, which was not as popular. That's why I'm revisiting rather this oil refinery topic. But what is the methodology? Well, first of all, for the first video, I only did my own desk research. After that first video, you guys gave me tons of feedback, and essentially for my second video, on top of my own desk research and my own Excel, I added on the refinery status tracker, which the link will be in below as an additional source of data. And I also added the refinery status image update bingo card to my sources, also in order to update my own tracker. And so that, when we look at the next slide, is all of the input that I take and use in addition to my own desk research to keep updating my own Excel. And here is the raw data. Pause the video if you're interested. And essentially, you see that I've marked in green all of the oil refineries which have been hit in 2025, in yellow all the oil refineries which have been hit in 2024 but not 2025, and in purple you see that one new hit oil refinery, which is a Mari oil refinery, since my last video. And so basically this is what I'm using to track the output, what I'm using to track all of the hits, and what I'm using to track the dates for every single hit across the board. And then also subsequently, when I want to do calculations on how much of the oil output may be down under certain assumptions. That was the video, guys. If you liked it, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, and it is a huge token of appreciation for my channel. So please do that. And so we're nearing the end of the year. We have some future video topics here. NATO versus Russia in terms of military size. How many Russian tanks are there left in storage? That's another topic one of you mentioned that they wanted to explore. And other than that, guys, I just want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Since I've made this channel, we've grown so quickly, so fast. At least I think that we've grown super quickly, so fast. And I just wanted to wish you all Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Have a great time with your loved ones. And if you are considering to buy a gift, I have written a couple of books here. You can see them on the slide deck. You can find those on Amazon and are probably a great idea for a Christmas present and are also a great way to support my channel. So thank you very much. And again, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.